Hi guys, and welcome to part 13 of Skyrim Mod Sanctuary. Now this video could well be a bit of a long one. I've got a lot of mods to show you. I want to get as many as possible out of the way in anticipation of the creation kit, which is about to drop on us any time now, and that's probably going to take up a little bit of my time when it first drops. So now for this video I'm going to be focusing on my latest playthrough, which is as a wizard. Now this wizard is going to focus on the destruction school, destruction, alteration, restoration, etc. Master of the elements, kind of a very, the typical sorcerer type character. Now I had already intended to do a playthrough like this previously. If you remember part 8, I've already done a mage playthrough. But what I found was at master difficulty, as you began to gain levels, it became harder and harder to kill things. It took longer and longer with destruction, and I was constantly running out of magicka. And I ended up specialising at conjuration and illusion, which by the way is a lot of fun, and is very, very powerful indeed. This time I really want to do the destruction mage, and I've got a lot of mods that are going to help me do that. Now the biggest problem with the destruction school is that it doesn't seem to scale very well. If you play a warrior or a thief, the damage you do with your weapon, with your sword or your bow, it goes up dramatically as the game progresses. The destruction school doesn't seem to do this as much. You start off very powerful, you feel very powerful as a destruction mage, but as the game progresses it becomes harder and harder, and on master difficulty it becomes almost impossible to kill things purely with magic, at least anything that's remotely tough. But luckily, of course, mods are out there, and there is one mod that I'm going to show you called Balanced Magic. Now, Balanced Magic attempts to basically do exactly what it says, balance the magic system. And it's supposed to be a comprehensive balance of the whole magic system, but currently it only seems to be destruction and alteration that get the most attention. The first thing this mod does is it increases your in-combat magic regen. Now, I don't know if you know, but when you're in combat, your magic regenerates at about a third the rate of out of combat. And this is, it's reasonable, but it's also, for the destruction school, a really major limiting thing, because once you've reduced yourself to 0 magicka, you've got nothing left to do. And as a destruction mage, that's pretty much game over. As a conjuration mage, you let your Atronach or your undead fight for you while you regen magicka. You don't have that option as a destruction mage. You're out of magicka. It's like being out of arrows as an archer. So this mod gives you some options. There are actually 3 different options. You can have it regen at 45%, that's the master option, 60% the adept option, or novice. Now I'll show you that later on how to install them. I actually use the adept option, which means I'm regenerating magicka at about 60% the rate I would out of combat. And that seems to be a good balance for me. I can use quite a lot of spells, but I can't go mad. If I miss a lot, I'm going to be in trouble. So all my spells have to hit, but I'm not constantly having to use thousands of potions, which is a real godsend. Now this mod also enhances the destruction school through the perks. In the vanilla game you get perks that half the amount of magicka used for different levels of spells. Well, what this mod does is it makes those perks reduce all spells by a certain percentage, but increase the damage those spells do each time you take the perk. So as you take more perks, the cost of all spells go down, and the damage those spells do go up. And it seems pretty well balanced. Generally speaking, I've not felt like I'm too powerful, but I haven't felt like I've been getting weaker as I level up. So I think this mod's pretty much hit the sweet spot, at least at master difficulty. Now for the alteration school, the mod does a similar thing, only for duration. So when you take novice, alteration, apprentice, etc., it just increases the time the spells last. And for alteration this is brilliant, because it doesn't make the spells much more powerful. It just means you don't have to macro manage them and constantly keep recasting them all the time between every fight non-stop. So it's more a matter of it just removes one of the major irritations, and it stacks with stability. And so things like Iron Flesh can end up lasting 10 minutes if you dual cast them. And this doesn't make the spell much more powerful because the armor rating's the same, but it does mean you don't have to macro manage it as much. You just put it up after every fight, and unless you've gone 5 or 6 minutes without getting into a fight, you don't have to worry about it all the time just in case you bump into something around the corner. It gets rid of one of the major headaches for alteration for me. And also with this mod, if you're only wearing clothing, no armor whatsoever, your Iron Flesh and Stone Flesh spells, etc., do more protection, depending on what skill level you are. Now, obviously, there used to be a perk that did that, called Mage Armor, and the mod mimics those perks more or less perfectly by level. But obviously, you don't need to spend perk on them, which means it's pretty powerful. And he's also replaced those perks with 3 perks called Less is More 1, 2 and 3, which reduce the amount of magicka needed to cast all spells of all schools. So that's pretty powerful. And this mod also makes it so that those perks, the Mage Armor, ignores Dragon Masks. So even though they count as armor, they count as clothing with regards to this perk. So that's useful. Now I actually don't need that because I use another mod called Mage Friendly Dragon Priest Masks. Bit of a mouthful, but what that essentially does is it takes the 3 masks that seem to be designed for mage characters and it turns them into clothing. It removes the armor rating from them and it makes them no longer light armor or heavy armor. They now give you no armor whatsoever. Now the advantage to this is it also means your light armor skill does not improve, and at master difficulty that can be kind of important. I don't want extraneous skills leveling me up too fast. And that's really it for this mod. It really does make the Destruction Alteration Mage a very viable playthrough even at master difficulty, so give it a try. And the next mod I'm going to cover is the Warmer Magic Lights mod. Now, this one basically makes the Mage Light and Candle Light warmer. And what I mean by that is if you've ever used those spells, you'll notice that the light has a slight bluish tinge to it. It looks very, very cold, very uncomfortable. I don't really like using it. I much prefer using a torch. And what this mod basically does is it makes that light a little warmer. Now, there are several different versions of it. The first 2 things you have to decide is what colour. There is a white version of the light, which is probably more realistic considering the nature of that light. But there is also the standard version, which is a little bit more orange and looks a little bit more like torchlight. Now, you could say it was unrealistic, but, you know, considering it's a white light at the top, but hey, it's magic, I don't care. To be honest, I really like the warmer one. It really does give the game a lot nicer look and feel when in dungeons, so that's the one I use. The second option you have is size. You can actually get the default Mage Light and Candle Light, or one that has a 3 times bigger radius. Now, if you're using the realistic lighting mod that I showed a couple of videos ago, this is really useful. It really does illuminate rooms a lot. And the Mage Light especially is very useful for throwing forwards down corridors or out in the open to see what is ahead. So you can throw it forward as you're running in that direction to illuminate where you are going. Very, very useful to uncover enemies. And that's basically that mod. There's nothing really complicated about it. And so I'm going to move on to talking about the Staff of Magnus. Now, the Staff of Magnus is kind of like the ultimate mage staff. You get it at the end of the mage school quest, and it's supposed to be super powerful, etc. And it looks very cool. But if you read the description, it says it absorbs 20 magicka per second. If the target is out of magicka, it absorbs health instead. Now, the terminology absorb seems to be a little bit debatable. What it means by that, usually when I say absorb, it's like it drains it from the target and gives it to you. And that would make this staff very powerful. But in actual fact, it doesn't. If you actually use this, I mean, I've tested it quite thoroughly. You can be pointing this at someone, firing away, and your magicka does not come back. It does not get absorbed into you. Now, the argument I've seen is that this is not a bug because it's the staff absorbs the magicka into itself and the health into itself. And I understand why that might be a valid argument, but I sort of reject it because they may as well have just called it damage magicka and damage health, because in the end the staff doesn't do anything with those things, unless I'm wrong. I mean, if someone knows something about this stuff, I don't. I'm thinking either this staff is bugged or it is not very good. And the reason I say it's not very good is damaging magicka by 20 is not very much at all. I've had plenty of staves and plenty of weapons that do exactly that and more very early on. In fact, the staff I had that replaced this staff damaged the target's health for 25 points and 50 magicka points. So it was so much more powerful, and yet is worth only a third. So I'm not convinced that the Staff of Magnus is working as intended. And so I have used two mods for the Staff of Magnus. The first one's called the Staff of Magnus Improved, which improves the textures, makes them higher definition, makes it a little darker, makes it a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more dangerous looking and very, very cool. So I like that. I like the retexture job on this. But I've also installed a mod called the Staff of Magnus Absorb Fix, which does pretty much what it says. When you hit targets with the Staff of Magnus, it now gives you 20 magicka from your target, and if they have no magicka, 20 health. It now is actually quite a useful staff to have if you've got a very powerful magic opponent and you're having difficulty draining him down because he's constantly healing. If you're doing master difficulty, you can put up a ward, a powerful ward, and then hit him with the Staff of Magnus, and it takes quite a while, but you can drain him, and the magicka you're draining from him feeds into you and keeps your ward going, and this allows you to basically completely drain him of his magic and then kill him. It costs a lot of soul gems to do that, so, you know, but then that's what you save powerful magic items for, killing the powerful bad guys. Now, the next mod I'm going to move on to is called the Deadly Spell Impacts mod. And basically, this takes the spell impacts from things like Lightning Bolt, Firebolt, etc., and it replaces the textures with far nicer, very high definition textures that are a little bit more interesting to look at. Now, obviously these textures are larger, so this is going to affect your performance a little. Not sure how much. I didn't really test it very much to see the performance difference. I just installed it and I'm using it, and I love the textures. Now, this is one of those things where you're really only going to notice it when you're looking at the impacts. So if you do have performance issues, this might not be the best mod for you unless you do wander around staring at the impacts of spells on walls. But otherwise, it's just this nice little edge of realism, just a little bit nicer if you've got the system to handle it. And the mod also changes the impact size of each spell as well, so there's a little bit more variety there. And all in all, it's just a general nice improvement to the way the game looks and feels after you have decimated a room full of bad guys with random fiery death. Now, no video on magic would be complete without covering the Midas Magic mod. Now, this mod was out for Oblivion 2 and was pretty much an essential mod if you wanted to play a wizard. And it's going to be the same in Skyrim. In fact, even though it's a sort of work in progress and it's still got a long way to go, I think, if you read what the author is saying, it's still absolutely superb. It adds a lot of new spells. I do mean a lot, more than 50. And they're not just different variations of existing spells that are in game. They are completely new spells with their own special effects and their own unique little twists. And it's just well worth trying out. They're a lot of fun. Now, a couple of the spells are a little overpowered, and the mod author even admits this. So there's probably quite a lot of balancing to be done. But one other thing that makes this mod really stand out is the fact that he doesn't just give you the spells or put them on vendors for you to buy. He adds something called a reactor, and it's a special machine that you have to put in special ingredients. And these ingredients usually include a gold ingot. In fact, I believe always involve a gold ingot, and different components. Now, some spells will just use butterfly wings, for example, and eagle feathers. I don't know if that's true, and some of them will use diamonds and Daedra hearts. So some of them are very hard to get. Some of the spells are very difficult to get because you have to get the ingredients for it, and you then make the spells the same way as you would make potions. And this makes it far more interesting because you get the spells in sort of small installments as you get different components, and it makes you appreciate the spells more. Which is a great idea, and it adds a sort of almost a feeling of questing for them. And actually, in the Oblivion mod, there was actually some questing involved in the Midas mod. So I'm expecting it to occur in Skyrim eventually as well. Now, if you don't like that, if for some reason you just want to buy the spells and have a go at them, there is a version that gives them to certain vendors. But you should be aware the mod author is not intending to keep that option in. That's just during the early stages for beta testing. So if you want to test it and buy them with cash, that's fine, you can do it, but do not expect that to stay in. But whichever version you decide to use, as a mage you definitely have to use this mod. I mean, things like the Midas Gravity Well, I mean, it is just such a very cool spell. Feather spell, so you can carry more, very useful. The Open Master Lock. There's an entire series of open spells that allow you to open locks doors with magic, thank God. Night Eye spell, useful for seeing in the dark, I mean, especially with realistic lighting. And of course, your usual combat spells. There's quite a lot of different combat spells, plasma spells, fire spells, a lot of really cool ones. A lot of fun to play with, their own special effects. There's poison cloaks, and they're actually quite like the poison cloak because unlike all the other damage cloaks, it's a very quiet one. It's a little green, but hey, it's quiet. I quite like that. But there are 3 spells that I especially do love in this mod. The first one is the Open series. Being able to open doors without having to raise lockpick is so nice. It really is. I hate having to raise lockpick, but I am literally unable to walk past a locked door. I just cannot do it. The second spell is the haste spell, which as long as you don't do anything after you've cast it, you can just run really, really fast, which is great for traveling if you don't want to use fast travel. And then there is a spell that actually lets you take the form of a wolf and run around as a wolf. Be warned, you can't do very much as a wolf except run around, but hey, it's cool. Now, one word of warning, whenever you enter a place that has one of the reactors, it can crash the game if you have autosave on travel set, so take autosave on travel off. The mod author is trying to fix that, but for now, it's a bit of a downside. Now, installation of all these mods is pretty easy, generally speaking. We use the Nexus Mod Manager. It's more or less for all of the mods, just download one file and activate it. For example, the Warmer Magic Lights, if you go to the file section, you can see Warmer Magic Lights version 2, version 2 big, version 2 white, version 2 white big. You just pick one of those, whichever one you like. Now, I like the standard version that is big, so I just download with the manager on this one. Dead easy. The Staff of Magnus Improved, single file. Staff of Magnus Absorb Fix. One thing you should be aware of with that mod is if you go to the mod manager and activate it with the mod manager, you get 3 files, Magnus 100, 20 and 50. Basically, the Magnus 20 leaves the staff absorbing 20 points of magicka, as it's supposed to. The other 2, the 100 and the 50, obviously this one absorbs 50, this one absorbs 100, so they're obviously massively more powerful. I think too powerful. Now, you should only have one of these selected. Only have one selected. If you have more than one selected, only the last one will register. And I've actually found, because Nexus Mod Manager sometimes activates these without you wanting to, it's actually worthwhile going along to the data folder and actually deleting the two that you don't want. So I'm going to delete the Magnus 100 and the 50. I'm going to delete those two, so they definitely don't appear. So that's that. You should pay attention to that. For Midas Magic, basically there are two main files. In fact, there are only two current files: the reactor version and the vendor version. Choose which one you want, download with Manager, activate. Couldn't be easier. Mage-friendly Dragon Priest masks. Again, there's some optional files. I didn't use them, so if you wish to, read the instructions, but I just did download with Manager and it worked perfectly. The Deadly Spell Impacts has two different versions, high quality and medium quality. Pick whichever you want. I'm using the high quality, but to be honest, as I've said before, if you have any performance issues, this is one of those things where you're only going to notice it if you look at the spells. And finally, Balanced Magic. Covering that last, even though it was the first mod I showed you. Now, as I mentioned, there are some choices you make here. The file itself, you just download the main file. That's all I did. I downloaded the main file, downloaded the Manager, and installed. But once installed, if you go to the Nexus Mod Manager, you'll see all these files here: Balanced Alteration, Conjuration, Destruction, Illusion. Now, I'm going to move the Restoration up here as well. The Restoration, Illusion, and Conjuration, I'm not sure they do anything at the moment. I'm going to leave them in, but I think he's put them there in anticipation of future changes. But currently there are changes to Destruction and Alteration. So if you want both, leave them both checked. If you don't like one of them, or you only specifically wanted one school balancing, you can just select that. But you'll also notice this Balanced Magic Adept, Master, and Novice. Now let me rearrange those. When you look at the web page on Nexus, as it will tell you what each of these actually does. Now, the Novice one gives you 75% combat magic regeneration. And again, there's a few other things you can read about how much it costs to dual cast, etc. The Adept gives slightly less powerful versions, and the Master basically gives things that are just a little bit better than vanilla, but only just. So if you really like it a little bit more balanced and you want a little bit faster magic regen, the Master version is the one for you. Now I play with Adept, so I'm going to uncheck Novice and Master. And it is important because once again, whichever of these files gets loaded last is the one that will win. And again, because I want the Adept, which gives in combat about double the magic regen in combat, which is still less than the out of combat one. Because I want that, and I don't want these to get activated automatically, I'm going to remove them from here. The Balanced Magic Master and Novice. Delete those. And that's about all you need to do. Now, I would just like to add, I really do mean it when I say there is no substitute for actually reading the mod author's instructions yourself. Remember that the mod may have changed since I made this video, or there may be a new file, or just something that has changed, or the mod author may actually disagree with something I've said. Always take their word for it. Always take their word for it. So be sure to read the description pages, any readmes they've got, any files that come with documentation. Do read them, especially if you're going to post a comment. And whilst we're at it, always remember to endorse these files. If you like them, if you like those mods, always endorse them. The mod authors don't get anything from it except satisfaction, sort of knowledge that people like their mods. And that, of course, encourages them to keep updating it and making more. And related to that, obviously, if you've enjoyed this video or found it useful, be sure to click the like button. That motivates and encourages me. I'm not totally sure when the next video is going to be, hopefully in about a week, but of course if the creation kit comes out fairly soon, I may take a few extra days playing with that, so it may be a little delayed, and I apologise if it is, but whenever it comes out, I hope you join me for that, and until then, have fun.